Jesus' peace surpasses understanding. Why? Because Jesus' peace isn't based on what's going on out there. It's based on who is with us in here. It says, on the evening of that day, the first day of the week, that's Easter Sunday, the doors being locked where the disciples were, for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. First thing we're going to see this morning is that the resurrection brings us new peace. It brings us new peace. Now, the disciples were anything but peaceful on that first Easter Sunday. Right? They were locked away in an upper room, cowering together. Why? Because they were afraid of the Jews. Now, they had pushed all their chips in on Jesus. They had given up their lives to follow him. But 3 days prior to this, they had watched as he was arrested by the Romans and the Jews in tandem, and he was crucified. He died a horrific death. And there had to be so many thoughts swirling around in their minds, right? Did we just waste the last 3 years of our lives? All the hope we had for the future, we thought he was the one that was going to save us, save Israel. And of course they were thinking, are we next? They came and got our master. Are they going to come for us next? And so they're surrounded by terrifying circumstances. They're full of fear and anxiety. And many of us can relate. Many of us have been through terrifying circumstances in life where we have no control. And that lack of control causes us a great sense of fear and anxiety. We feel trapped. I remember a couple of years ago, I was in the car with my aunt and uncle. We were driving to meet up with my family and have dinner on Green River Road, and this massive storm hit. And we were right there at the stoplight next to the Showplace movie theater on Green River. And the rain was falling so heavy that you couldn't see the buildings on either side of the road. All you could see was the glow of the neon lights. But then all of a sudden, the lights went out. And the stoplights went out. And traffic stopped. And we were stuck. And our car started shaking. And my wife was 8 months pregnant. And I thought to myself, God, I really don't want to die in a tornado a month before my wife gives birth. You know, my aunt was saying, no, God, please, no. God, no, please. And I'm like, my anxiety levels are just rising. And I finally yell at my uncle, and I'm like, you've got to drive. You got to get out of here. And of course, we're stuck. And so he turns a hard left, and he gets up on the median and starts driving on the median until he gets us into the strip mall parking lot where Zuki's at. And I'm banging on all the doors as I'm running down that strip mall, and Zuki's like, hey, you come in here and have some sushi. And I'm like, sushi's the last thing on my mind right now, okay? But I did go inside. Obviously, I'm still here to tell the tale, so things worked out okay. But I honestly just remember feeling terrified and trapped in that moment, like I was about to get sucked up in a tornado or something. And I know that the disciples felt even more afraid and trapped than it could compare to the way I felt in that moment. But then, in the midst of their circumstances, in the midst of their fear, in the midst of them being locked in an upper room, Jesus shows up. Now, he didn't walk through the front door. It says he's just there among them. His resurrection body that he had, it was the same body that he had been put to death in, but it was glorified. It still bore the marks. It was physical. He could eat. He could be touched. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a phantom. He wasn't a spirit. He was a real person. But it was glorified in such a way that apparently he had the ability to come in and out of locked rooms at his leisure. And so there he is. And what does he say to them? What's the first word that he says? Peace. Peace. Peace be with you. See, he offers them a new kind of peace. in a couple of ways. First of all, he offers them the peace of his presence, of simply being there. Jesus came and stood among them. Now you remember the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They got thrown into the fiery furnace because they wouldn't bow down and worship the statue. And as they were there in that fire, in the midst of terrifying circumstances, flames encircling them, no hope, certainly full of fear, I would imagine, all of a sudden, a fourth person stood among them. It was so striking that King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods." It was an Old Testament appearance of Jesus Christ who had come and he had stood in the fire with them. Their circumstances hadn't changed. They were still in the furnace. But the difference was that there was another one standing next to them. Jesus said this in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." In other words, Jesus said, I haven't come to give you the same type of peace that the world can offer to you. I've came to give you a new kind of peace. See, the world's peace, it's based on your circumstances. Things are going good, things are going well, it can be peaceful. I'm in control. I've got everything managed the way I need it to be managed. It's easy to have peace in moments like that. But Jesus' peace transcends circumstances. Jesus' peace surpasses understanding. Why? Because Jesus' peace isn't based on what's going on out there. It's based on who is with us in here. I love what Levi Lusko says. He says, we often think that peace is the absence of trouble, but peace is not the absence of trouble. Peace is the presence of God. If Jesus is the Prince of Peace and he is present in a situation, then even in trouble, you can have peace. It's a new kind of peace that you won't find in the world. But secondly, he offers them peace, the peace of his payment. The peace of his payment. When he had said this, we're told in verse 20, he showed them his hands and his side. It was as if he was saying, I paid for the very thing that hindered your peace. See, the thing that robbed us of our peace with God, the thing that robbed us of the peace of eternal life is sin, death. But as Jesus appeared among them, he showed his wounds and he said, look, here's your sin. Here's death. Here's the payment that has taken care of the very things robbing you of your peace. See, as Jesus was nailed to the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And what we recognize is in that moment, Jesus was experiencing hell. That's what hell is. It's to be truly forsaken by God. We've never experienced that. We've always enjoyed, at the very least, the common grace of his sun rising and, the food growing. We go to the grocery store, we find things on the shelves. God's common grace is extended to unbelievers and believers alike. But to be truly God-forsaken, Jesus experienced that in that moment. And he bore an infinite amount of punishment, an eternity's worth of punishment that our sin had achieved for us. He bore that in himself. And so now he comes to the disciples and said, here's the proof of my payment. This is why Isaiah would write in Isaiah 53:5, but he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. His punishment brought us peace. Peace with who? Peace with God. And because we have peace with God, every other problem we face in life, it's nothing compared to what Jesus has already taken care of. He's dealt with the biggest peace hindrance that we could have possibly had, our sin. And so when the disciples experienced this, it says that they were glad. Or maybe a better translation would be that they were overjoyed. Their peace or their fear was replaced with a great joy. And this is what the resurrection brings us. It brings us a new kind of peace.